right. Are there any thoughts or questions that have come up over the lunch break? All right. So let us then come back to our motivation, recollecting that it is our goal to, as beginner practitioners, to truly enter the Buddhist path by realizing at first the small scope of the Lamrim, to become someone who cares more about future lives than just comfort, enjoyment of however many days or weeks or years are left in this one life. Yeah, this is the first goal of a Buddhist practitioner, to realize the small scope of the Lamrim. And in order to do that, we have to use the realization of our own mortality to fuel our practice, to help us to turn away from distraction to focus on what is important. So we cultivate a concern not that we will die, but a concern that we might die without having practiced. And we use that concern to keep us oriented on the path so that we can realize the small scope and then the middle scope and then the great scope. We can completely actualize our potential. We can achieve the state of full enlightenment, not for oneself alone, but to be of the greatest benefit to sentient beings. All right, and then with that motivation, we will move into the first meditation, which is essentially more or less the opposite of the disadvantages. We will contemplate the advantages of recollecting death and impermanence again and again, see all of the benefits that we will receive in our practice in our lives if we integrate a constant recollection of death and impermanence. So, as we do, try to situate yourself in a stable, upright position. And then just move your mind away from thoughts of the past, plans for the future, moving the mind inward away from even what's happening in your environment. Just concentrating the mind, focusing on the sensation of the air as it moves into and back out of the tip of the nostrils. Trying to notice as quickly as possible when the mind moves into distraction, and then to lift your awareness up each time and gently but firmly place it back just on that one physical sensation of the air. We begin to contemplate the 6 advantages of recollecting death, the first of which is that it makes our life most beneficial, imbuing our lives with great meaning, great purpose, because we easily can maintain a mindfulness to practice, to transform all of our actions into Dharma activities, recognizing that death can come even today. We avoid non-virtue. We look for opportunities to engage in virtue. We avoid distraction. We find it easy to put time and energy and effort into creating the causes of a good future rebirth. So think along this line of reasoning and try to tap into that sense of urgency that you have some experience with, arises from time to time. And think of how beneficial it would be to maintain that urgency. Being able to effortlessly focus. The second advantage is how powerful of an antidote this is in destroying negativity. Each time anger, malice, jealousy, ill will arises in the mind, we can remind ourselves that death could come in the next moment, and how terrible it would be to die with that kind of mind. How terrible it would be to die not having been able to purify the negative karma that arises from those actions, actions motivated by those states of mind. How terrible it would be to die with the imprints, the tendency, the habit of malice, jealousy, applying this antidote can cool the boiling afflictions when they arise. So here again, contemplate how beneficial it would be to have this tool through deep familiarity, to be able to recollect death and use it as an effective antidote. And the third advantage of remembering death is that it is important in the beginning of our practice. We think that this perfect human rebirth is the result of many stainless prayers, many lifetimes of virtuous actions, guarding morality, engaging in acts of generosity and patience. And this recollection of death can be invaluable in helping us to jumpstart our practice again in this life, to take the essence of our perfect human rebirth, which is the result of so much of our own past effort. We can avoid wasting all of that effort through this recollection. Again, think about how you yourself can use this recollection day by day to stay committed, to find that fuel for your practice. The next advantage is that as we progress in our practice, we will be able to rely on this recollection to overcome any obstacles that we face. No matter what difficulties arise, we can overcome them by understanding the need to focus on our practice because of the beginningless and endless nature of the mind, how all of the virtuous and non-virtuous seeds that we plant will bring a result in the future, and how time is short to plant those virtuous seeds, to uproot those negative seeds. So no matter what challenges we face, we'll have the fortitude to keep going. And think that this recollection is not only helpful in the beginning of our practice, it's not only helpful in the middle of our practice, it's helpful even at the end of our practice when we are approaching enlightenment. Never forgetting this recollection allows us to complete the accumulation of virtue, merit, that will culminate in our enlightenment. The final advantage is that at the end of this life, if we maintain this mindfulness of death, we will be able to die happily, without regret. The greatest of practitioners look forward to the time of death, seeing it as an opportunity to achieve enlightenment in the intermediate state. Middling practitioners face death with strong confidence that their next rebirth will be beneficial, that they will continue to practice. And even the least practitioners feel as though they've not wasted their time, that they used their life productively to the best of their ability and die without regret, without fear. So think in this way and be determined to use this recollection to make the most of your life. And when you're ready, we'll come back together. Any thoughts or questions? We'll take another 10-minute break and we'll come back at 2:15 Mountain Time. Any questions, thoughts, questions? So the next meditation is probably similar to if people we're in those two classes that Venerable Katie did. I think it'll be in some way similar. It'll be on, oh, well, no. Well, is there not a meditation on the dissolutions? I thought there was. Oh, yeah. Okay, they wrote it kind of as two, which is strange. Okay, so typically, the meditation on the dissolutions is joined with a visualization. So if you're going to meditate on the dissolutions that occur at death, typically you preface that with actually, visualizing that you are obviously going through the death process, because these are the dissolutions that arise at the time of death. So we'll start with that aspect of it. And then, so in a way, this is sort of like a rehearsal, right, for our own death, because of course, we don't know how we're going to die. The best that we can hope for is to have some awareness, ahead of time, through perhaps an illness. We get told that we've got X number of months because of some illness, or we just, you know, we make it to our 90s, and so we have some awareness that there's just not that much more time. Of course, it could be a car accident or a plane crash or a fire or something less fortunate, but the most fortunate way that we should at least hope is that it's kind of more gradual. So that gives us the best opportunity to um, meditate as we are dying to the best of our ability, and to try to generate a virtuous frame of mind during that time. But of course, all of that, the fact that we don't have control over exactly what is going to happen, underscores, of course, the importance of doing everything that we can to be able to tolerate a variety of, to remain calm, to remain peaceful, even in a difficult situation, a more difficult situation, to the best of our ability. Of course, that depends on how much time we have to practice and so on. But we will be meditating on the dissolution of the body. Okay, so once again, try to situate yourself in a comfortable upright position, and just calm the mind on your own for a couple of minutes, entering into a calm, focused state, in whatever way works best for you. And then begin to imagine that you find yourself on your deathbed in the last day of this life. Think that you might be surrounded with family or friends, loved ones. And these are people that will be surviving you. In the past, you engaged in activities with them. Tomorrow or the next day, they will be talking about you in the past tense. And think that this body that you have cared for, cherished, protected, will soon become like a log, unfeeling, inanimate, something to be buried or cremated. So, on this last day of this body and this mind being connected, you'll first notice the earth element of the body dissolving. The body will have become thin and weak. Your eyesight will have failed. You may have a sensation of a great weight on the chest. And internally, to the mind, there will appear a vision like a mirage, like a shimmering of a mirage on a hot day. The next change to take place is the dissolution of the water element. The fluids of the body dry up. Swallowing becomes difficult. The body no longer distinguishes between pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings. There's no feeling tone to experience. Becoming capable of discerning internal or external sound of any kind. And internally in the mind, the vision of smoke appears, like the blowing out of a candle or a match. And then the fire element of the body begins to dissolve, and you lose the ability to ingest any food or liquid. You lose discernment of names, of faces. And the breath begins to change. Each inhalation is weak. And the exhalations become long and ragged. Into the mind, there appears a vision of sparks, like a burning log being hit. And next, the wind element begins to dissolve, and the breath stops completely. You become incapable of any physical action. You no longer have any discernment of the outside world. There's no longer any experience of taste, no bodily sensations. The mind remains connected to the body, but there's no longer breath of any kind. At this stage, the appearance to the mind is like the flickering of a dying candle. The body and the mind are still connected. And then there appears the white vision, a clear vacuity filled with a white light. And after the white vision is what is called the black near attainment, an emptiness, a vacuity that's filled with thick darkness. Black near attainment subsides, the clear light of death arises, the subtlest mind that can arise in this life. So here, try to concentrate, try to hold the mind in this appearance of clear light, and try to meditate on wisdom realizing emptiness. Think all things are empty of inherent existence. Nothing exists under its own power, from its own side. All phenomena are interdependent and exist as mere imputations, that which is merely labeled by the mind. To remain in the clear light with this wisdom understanding emptiness, using it, using the subtlety of the mind to penetrate the meaning of emptiness. All right, and then when you're ready, we'll come back together. Any thoughts or questions? So earlier, when I mentioned that the greatest practitioners look forward to death, that's really the reason, is because their mind is going to go through this process, and the clear light of death is going to naturally arise. And it is, as I mentioned, it is the subtlest. When Venerable Katie, she mentioned, which it's actually not part of, it's a little bit more advanced than what's presented in this module, so it's not presented here, but the reverse, she mentioned that she would be. So maybe, you might want to review those two classes, because she says she would also integrate the reverse process, where, so it's kind of like, we start out, we talked in the very first module that was about the mind, how the mind has these different levels of coarseness to subtlety, and how when you're, out and about in the world, and you're talking and you're moving around and you're manipulating objects in the world, that the mind is very coarse at that point, for an ordinary person, because you're engaging, with external reality, you're talking and so on. um, and then as you're meditating, or you're napping, or, the mind, those states, they're more subtle, because the mind is just more withdrawn. The mind is more internal. The mind isn't engaging with what is outside of itself. And the death process is a process of increasing subtlety, where the mind is with, as we saw, these elements. And it's kind of a poetic way, earth element, fire element, water element. It's sort of a poetic way of talking. The earth element is the solidity of the body, the muscles, kind of the frame of the body itself. And then, the fluidity of the body is the water element, the motility of the body is the air element, the heat that comes from digestion and so on, that's the fire element. Sort of it's not made up, but it's, kind of a poetic way of talking about just the bodily processes. Um, and they're failing, right? They're ceasing to function, which is talking about their dissolution. Like they were chugging along, they were doing what they were supposed to be doing, but then the causes and the conditions that allow them to do that begin to, no longer be present, and that's what they would call the dissolution of those functions of the physical body. And then you reach a point where, because of the lack of functioning of the physical body, the mind simply can no longer remain connected. The connection between body and mind depends upon the functioning of the body at a certain level, and you go below that level, mind has no choice but to separate. And then we call that death. So those stages, and these stages occur no matter how you die. Whether you die in a fire, or you die, from a gunshot, or you will go through all of these stages, but you may just go through them very quickly. If you hit a brick wall going 80 miles an hour, you're going to go through these stages, but they're all going to happen basically in one instant. And you have no chance, really. I mean, if you were a truly exceptional, incredible meditator, maybe you would have. It's hard to say, but if you die kind of slowly, um, then in a sort of non-traumatic way, then you have the best chance, of body and mind remaining connected, and being able to elongate this period where the mind of clear light is arising, right? If there's a great deal of trauma to the body all at once, then probably the mind really has no choice but to be just ejected from that physical form, because the physical form is so badly damaged so completely all at once that your mind is just gone. The mind of clear light is there, but then the body, the connection is just severed. However, if you die of old age or you die of cancer or something like that, or liver failure or heart, congestive heart failure, something like that, or probably, could even be maybe a heart attack might even be okay, for this sort of thing where, you're relatively in okay shape. There's not like mass trauma to your body as a whole, then you can, if you're a really good as I said, the greatest practitioners, they recognize, well, I am going to die, and the mind of clear light is necessarily going to arise. And because that is the subtlest that it is possible for my mind to ever be, I can use that to meditate on emptiness, and I can create these incredibly powerful imprints of wisdom realizing emptiness during my final meditation. That's why when Lama Zopa Rinpoche passed away, they called that like his final meditation. When these great masters pass away, they'll talk about that being their final meditation when because they're, as their body and mind are separating, they're entering meditation, and when the mind of clear light is arising, they're elongating that period. They are focusing in on it, and they can remain, for the greatest practitioners, they can remain in that state for days, and in some cases weeks, where the body and the mind are connected and they are absorbed in meditating on emptiness with the mind of clear light. Um, and even under normal circumstances, that, you know, the the time from when the breath stops to the time when the body and mind separate, it's not a short period of time. Again, if there's not trauma, it can be a day, it can be 2 days, it can even be up to 3 days under, for just like ordinary people. They're not, now that doesn't mean that they're meditating on emptiness. That doesn't mean that they're using that in a spiritual way, but the body and the mind remain connected for hours, perhaps even days after the breath stops, after the respiration stops. And if you're a highly skilled meditator, when the reason that you want to practice this is so that you can recognize, okay, well, this internal sign just arose, so I know this is the end of the first dissolution. Okay, well, now this other sign just arose, so now I know I'm at the second dissolution, and so on. And then when the black near attainment is there, you're like, okay, now the mind of clear light is about to arise. So, that's my opportunity. That's why I should be looking forward to this, because I can create these incredible imprints in my mind, because my mind is going to be at its most concentrated, its most subtle. So if I can recollect emptiness at that time, which is going to be really the power of previous meditations, previous familiarities on emptiness. You're not probably going to realize it without any, at that time with no prior practice, but due to the force of habit, due to the force of familiarity, having spent a lifetime cultivating that, then at that time you can hold the mind in the clear light of death, and then really create these incredibly powerful karmic imprints for your spiritual practice, which is an opportunity that just naturally arises when you study the Vajrayana tradition. The only advantage of the Vajrayana tradition is that you can do the same thing just on a normal day. You can cause the clear light mind to arise and then do your meditation and then be fine and like go to dinner. Everything is just part of your day. You're just able to do that at will. Whereas if you're not, you can't do that. You just have this one opportunity where the mind of clear light will arise at the time of death. Um, but with Vajrayana, you're able to generate the mind of clear light at will, but it's very, very difficult. It's a highly, highly realized, practitioner that can get to that stage. But that's why it's beneficial. It doesn't have any benefit other than that, other than voluntarily bringing your mind to that state of clear light, because there is no state of mind that is any more subtle than that, biologically, or what nature allows, you could say. It's just, it doesn't get any subtler than that, no matter what. And then in the next moment, as a Venerable Katie probably did, your mind actually becomes coarser compared to the mind when you go through the reverse process and you enter the intermediate state, body and mind. All of this time, you're not, from the Buddhist perspective, you're not dead at any point, during these dissolutions. Um, because your body and your mind are still connected. It's only when you enter the intermediate state that you are now dead, and this life is over. And the moment that you enter the intermediate state, your mind is coarser than it was when the clear light was arising. And then you go through this process where, you're going to take rebirth, and that's a process of increasing coarseness to the mind that culminates in birth. And once you are born and you're screaming and crying, and then the mind is again as coarse as it can get. Um, so it kind of goes like this sort of, wave kind of form where you're okay, and then you're dying, and the mind is getting more and more coarse. The clear light mind arises. You've reached the peak level of subtlety, and from there, it's only increasing coarseness that is available to the mind. Um, and so that's kind of how it's a very, very dramatic state change, but it's just one continuity of mind becoming more and more subtle, and then becoming more and more coarse. Um, so it's an opportunity that is provided, to us, to, if we are able to take advantage of it, it's an opportunity that we have that is unique for being able to create these really strong positive imprints at the time of death. Um, so we practice this over and over again so that we can seize that opportunity. And of course, that's why we study, emptiness, and so we do the meditations on emptiness and so on as well, so that we've already generated some insight, some wisdom, of that topic, that we're just joining with the mind of, the clear light mind. Any thoughts or questions about today? Robert is pondering.
Question is, Venerable Katie talked about the coarser mind disappearing, and then there's three states of subtler mind states. Then we had clear light. The question really is, how do they know about these subtle states after the gross? Are practitioners able to go in there now before and come back out?
Yeah, I think I mean, I would imagine perhaps um, Vajrayana practitioners still maybe to some degree have to experience when they themselves are causing the mind of clear light to arise. Could be that they are still going through this process, and so they're able to say, oh, well, it was like this, and then it was like this, and then it was like that. Also, I think there are some practitioners who just remember, you know, their death process. In, you know, highly realized practitioners can report back what their last death was like, you know, and they were able to recollect what they went through as they were dying. Um, so yeah, I think it comes from the direct experience of highly realized masters who have, you know, were able to experience it and then tell other people, basically, to what, either because it was a memory of a normal, relatively normal death, or I don't know, it could be that as you're trying to generate the mind of clear light, you just naturally progress through these stages that that culminate in the mind of clear light, even if it's just as a meditative practice. But all of this, yeah, all of this comes from the Vajrayana. All of this wisdom comes from what they would call the Tantras. It's not, you really don't find this in the sutra material, like the Buddha didn't, you know, it's not part of like the discourses on the Four Noble Truths, or, you know, it's not part of the sutra material. All of this wisdom is contained, all of the very detailed wisdom about death and the stages of death and the mind of clear light. It's all coming from the Vajrayana tradition, the esoteric tradition. So yeah, I don't know if the three were the white, red, and black. Maybe those were the three, the white, red, and black appearances. But I mean, all of these with the, you know, the sparks. I mean, these are all the dissolutions, right? I mean, there's dissolutions that happen before the breath stops, and then there are the dissolutions that happen after the breath stops. But all of these dissolutions are part of the death process. So the dissolution of, and again, it always follows the same order: the earth element, the water element, the fire element, the wind element. Um, and then after that comes the mind of white appearance, red appearance, and black near attainment. Those are the three visions that occur before the mind of clear light. But it's one continuous process that necessarily we have to experience. It's just a question of how fast it's going to unfold, and that really depends on how damaged our body is at that time. If things are relatively okay, then we'll experience them kind of over the course of hours, or even days. But if it's a very traumatic experience, then it happens almost all at once. Any other thoughts or questions? Nope. So I think we can leave it there for today. We've done the 9 point death meditation before, so I think everybody, if there were a lot of new people, then I would do that. But we did that one, I think, on the in the module on the 3 stages, presenting the path. I think we did it there. So I don't know. It's, you know, good this weekend if you want to do the 9 point death meditation. Death is certain, the time of death is uncertain, and at the time of death, only my Dharma practice will be of any benefit. You know, it's good to do, but I think we've done it, so we're familiar. So we can leave it there for today, unless there are any final questions about the meditation aspect of the course. Nope. All right, so we'll just end with dedication then. So think back over your efforts today. Think back to this morning. your causal motivation. And you woke up this morning and you decided to be here, your interest in this topic, your understanding of its importance. And think that all of these actions in studying this module over the past 6, 7 weeks has been part of your larger effort to understand the Lam Rim, the stages of the path to enlightenment. And the Buddha gave us the stages of the path, gave us the teachings of the stages of the path so that we could follow in his footsteps, so that we could replicate his wisdom, his understanding. We could achieve our enlightenment in the same way that he achieved his enlightenment. And the purpose of achieving enlightenment is out of a deep understanding of the suffering that sentient beings experience. Now, again and again, kind mother sentient beings are dealing with pain and suffering without choice. So our motivation is to alleviate that pain, that suffering. And the first step is to become a genuine practitioner of the small scope, to realize the small scope, to put an end to distraction, to focus on our practice with urgency, consistency. So I think by having engaged in all of that effort, you've generated a great deal of positive energy in our minds, following through on that intention, that motivation. That positive energy will ripen in the future. It will ripen in beneficial ways. So we want it to ripen as this succession of perfect human rebirths in which we can complete the path, achieve our enlightenment, so that we can lead all sentient beings to a state beyond suffering, a state of perfect happiness, perfect contentment. We can use this life to repay the kindness that sentient beings have shown us. So in your own way, think of offering your time, your energy, your effort to the ripening of those results. All right. So the quiz, I don't know if everyone here is taking the quiz, but I have it and I will send it out right now in the next half an hour. It's a little bit different than the previous quizzes because there is a certain aspect. You're being asked to do some memorization, which is, I think, kind of new. So I'm going to give people longer to so it's important to just think of this as like, this quiz is telling me what I need to get out of this module. And so I'm going to have a little bit more time to finish that process. It's not like so you can read the quiz right now, um, and so on. And you'll have until the 4th, Monday, the 4th, so a little over 2 weeks to get to the point where you have done that memorization. You feel confident that you've been able to complete what is being asked in the quiz. Uh, so a little bit more time than is normal because there's this aspect of memorization. And the memorization, it's helpful. It's not just like, I mean, it is to some degree. I don't know if I don't like the phrase rote memorization, but when we're meditating, it is helpful to be able to call upon, um, things without having to look them up, without having to be able to have things at your fingertips. When you go to teachings, all of the geshes, when they're answering questions, they'll recite like in Tibetan that paragraph of that because they've memorized it, right? They've memorized that text that they're thinking of that's going to answer your question, right? And they say, and because English isn't their first language, they'll spend like 20 seconds reciting that paragraph out loud, and then they'll answer your question, right? Because they've done this memorization. So it is helpful, to be able to recall these things, to have them just at our fingertips. And that's why there's this memorization that's being asked for in the quiz. It isn't just, there's lots of lists and things in Buddhism. I understand that. But the purpose is that, isn't just to be able to say, oh, I am someone who can tell you what the 6 or the 8 or the 4 are, but that in meditation, I can easily recollect, this piece of knowledge, this wisdom, and yeah. So, so there is some of that, and so you'll have more time to return the quiz. You don't have to return it until May 4th. May the 4th be with you. All right. Bye.